So in this video and upcoming future videos, we are going to see how we can implement and work on ABAP Restful Application Programming model in unmanaged scenario. So if you are following my channel and my videos, we have a full list of ABAP RAP with managed scenario. We have seen so many things and so many concepts over there. So this is altogether a new series focusing on unmanaged scenario in ABAP RAP. Let's understand what is the history a little bit. We have already seen most of these things in the introduction part of the managed scenario as well, but let's go through it once more. First, let's see what are all programming models available. Very first, if we see here, it all contains the classic ABAP programming, which is available before 7.5, ABAP platform before 7.5, and it consists of FPM, which stands for Floor Plan Manager. Then WebDin Pro was another thing, and normal AC38 programs. So this was the programming model we have been following if you are working before 7.5 version of. Now the next is ABAP platform after 7.5. It comes with ABAP programming model, and this mainly focus on the Fiori stuff, and the new things which comes with this programming model is SCGW, which is normally used to create the services, the OData services. Then the other thing is OData annotations, CDS views, and BOPF, which mainly used for the transactional apps. These all the things we are pretty much aware of. What are all these things? CDS views, basically in this 7.5 version, after 7.5, CDS views were only read only. So you can only read the data using the CDS view. There was no capability of providing the CRUD operation using the CDS view, and you can only create read-only applications using CDS views if you are not going to use any other concept. Now, for providing the transactional capability to your Fiori application, if you are using a CDS view, it will not have the transactional capability. So to overcome that limitation, we were having BOPF functionality. So this is mainly used to provide the transactional capability to your Fiori application. Now these are all the things which comes on ABAP platform after 7.5. Now the latest one which is available is SAP Cloud plus S4HANA 1909, which is called a Restful Application Programming Model. So this is the latest programming model which SAP has come up with, and it has pretty much all of the capabilities of the previous generation, as well as so many new things. For example, the CDS views. So CDS views are still available with the RESTful Application Programming Model, but it also comes with a new kind of CDS view, which is CDS Entity Views. Now, these CDS views were DDIC based views. If we recall, when you create a CDS view, normal CDS view, it also creates some of the DDIC objects, like SQL view is getting created, and other behind the scene other objects were also getting created. SAP has come up with a new stuff which is CDS Entity View, and it doesn't create any of the extra DDIC objects when you create a CDS Entity Views. All of these things we have seen. If you are following my other list of CDS views and annotations, everything has been covered there. Now, the RESTful application programming model, another new thing which come up is behavior definition, service definition, and service binding. When we talk about the behavior definition here, in RESTful application programming model as well, we create the services just like we create in SEGW, but the way of creating the services here in ABAP RAP is little different, and that creates a number of classes, and with the predefined methods you need to implement those methods if you want to incorporate your custom logic. These three things pretty much work around those stuffs, and the first thing is behavior definition. So this behavior definition means what kind of behavior that service will have. For example, a behavior could be creation of a record, deletion of record, updation of record, modification of the record. So all those kind of crude operation you can say. So those will be behavior for your business object. Now, if you have the behavior definition, you must have the implementation as well. So when you create a behavior definition, you get these methods out of the box, and you need to implement those methods to put your own logic. Now, if we talk about managed scenario, all of these things gets generated, but everything is behind the scene. You never see all of those codes getting generated, but they are still there. Create operation, read operation, delete operation, modify operation, everything, all of the crude operation we get out of the box if we use the managed scenario. But in unmanaged scenario, you get the methods, and you need to implement those methods and feed in with your own logic, your custom logic there. Now, the next thing is service definition, where we expose the entities as a service. So whatever entities we have created, those will be exposed as a service in this. And then the last one is service binding. In this step, we define what kind of binding we want, what kind of service we want, whether it is V2 service or V4 service, whether we want to create an API, or whether we want to create a service for UI, which may contains the CDS annotations, right? And all of these things we will be seeing in this series and in upcoming videos. So service binding is basically creates the SICF node. If we try to understand this, the SICF node is created at this step, and you can understand this step with an annotation which we used normally to create the OData service, which is @odata.publish. So whatever @odata.publish annotation does, everything is done here, the same kind of stuff. Okay, so these were the a little information on the programming model, different programming model. In this series, we will be looking at ABAP Restful Application Programming Model, the unmanaged scenario. Okay, now the next slide here shows you a little graphical, or I should say the same thing but in a little different diagram. And let's try to understand this, what exactly is going on here when you create a OData service using RESTful Application Programming Model. This doesn't contain anything specific to unmanaged or managed scenario, but these are generic steps which we follow in both the scenarios, managed as well as unmanaged. Database table is always there. Now on the top of this database table, we first create the interface view. It can be CDS view or CDS entity view. CDS entity view is a new stuff and it is a best practice. So try to create CDS entity views rather than the CDS views. But these CDS views are still available. Now, once the interface view is created, we create the projection views where we define all of the annotations and the UI annotations basically. So this is the CDS section. Now the next section is a behavior. So once your projection views and interface views are created, this thing is done, then we create the behavior definition. This entity view and behavior definition is 0 to 1 relationship. So what we can say is there will always be one behavior definition for each entity, and there will always be one root entity. There cannot be multiple root entities here. So once you create the behavior definition, you get all the CRUD related operations: insert, delete, update, and all those things. Now once you create the behavior definition, all of these operations needs to be implemented as well if you want to write the code there, which is true for unmanaged scenario. Now once this behavior section is done, we are on the third step where we create the service, where we create the OData service and we expose the entities. So whatever entities are there, we expose in this third step where we create the service definition. So whatever entity you want to expose, you expose in the service definition section. Now the last part is, once these are exposed, the last part is actual creation of SICF node and publishing the service. So service binding is basically we are creating SICF node behind the scene, or we can say we are publishing the service, keeping in mind whether you want to publish it as a V2 service or a V4 service, whether you want to publish it for API or you want to publish it for UI development. So all of those kind of settings you do when you create the service binding. So this box is done. Once all of these steps are completed, you get the OData service, and then the same OData service you can use to create the Fiori application, which can be transactional application as well. Now in unmanaged scenario, our main focus would be this part, the CRUD operation, because in unmanaged scenario you get the methods definition and then you need to implement them. You need to implement the behavior for those methods. There are multiple different methods which we get when we create the behavior definition. Now let's see what kind of class it generates when you select the unmanaged scenario while creating the behavior definition. So when you use unmanaged scenario, or when you select the unmanaged option when you create the behavior definition, it creates a class and it has basically two sections. So one section is a handler class and another section is saver class, and you can identify this thing with LHC and LSC, which stands for local handler class and local saver class. Now these handler class and the saver class have their own functionality and features along with different methods which they provide out of the box. But you still, since this is unmanaged scenario, you still need to implement those methods which are available in the classes like handler class and the saver class. Whenever a handler class logic is getting executed, that is called interaction phase, and when the saver class logic starts, it called the save sequence. So if any of these methods are getting executed, then it will be a save sequence. It will call a save sequence. These are all the sequence of methods which gets executed. That's why it is called save sequence. It means cursor is in any of these methods, then your data is going from local LUW buffer to, so when your code of create, update, delete, read, all of these method is getting executed inside the handler class or local handler class, that is called your interaction phase. And once the cursor starts executing the saver class or the local saver class, these methods, then it is called a save sequence. We say a save sequence started. What happens here is, in the handler class you have different methods available. All of these methods are from the handler class method, and what these method does is, these methods works on the data coming from the front end, and it saves the incoming data to transactional buffer. It doesn't actually saves the data into database table. So handler class will work on the transactional buffer, and once the saver class triggers or the methods triggers, then based on the result of these methods, that data from the transactional buffer moved to the persistent state, or we can say it actually gets saved to the database table. Now all of these handler class methods are pretty much understandable what these methods will do, but still we will be seeing all of these methods in detail when we create the application using unmanaged scenario. Now let's see what exactly these methods are, because these methods are little more important. Why? Because the data will be going to persistent state from these methods. These are the methods which actually will be validating or saving the data to the database table. Now once the handler class method is completed, for example you are creating a record, so create method is done, then the save sequence will be triggered. Now very first method which is get executed is finalize method, and this method will get triggers once at least one successful modification of data in the current LUW. At least one record will be executed successfully in the current logical unit of work, and it is the first method of save sequence to be called and used to make any final calculation and the data modification for your business object. And this method is basically the last chance to modify your data onto the transactional buffer using modify request. So this, after this handler class, this is the only method if you still want to make any change in your transactional buffer. So this is the place where you can make those changes, and this is the very first method which gets executed once the handler class gets completed. Now the second method is check before save. The functionality of this method is, it checks the consistency of your transactional buffer. So whatever things you have in your transactional buffer, this method is used to check the validity or the consistency of that data. For example, you are having header and child relationship data or those kind of data, right? It should be consistent before saving to the database. Now if this method is successful, it means all of your data will be saved into the database. Now if you want to put any of the validation, this is the place you can put whatever extra validation you want. Now the next method is save method. So as the name suggests, this will save your transactional buffer data to persistent, or it will make your transactional buffer data a persistent data which will be actually saved into your database table. One of the important thing of getting executed this save method is it will only gets executed, or it will only gets triggered only after these two or the previous any of the methods gets executed successfully without any error. Then only this save method will be triggered. So this method will actually saves your data to the database. Now the next method is a cleanup method. As the name suggests, this method clears the transactional buffer and is only called after the save method has been processed. So once the save method is completed, then only the cleanup method will be triggered, and it is the final method of the save sequence. So after this, saving will be completed into the database. Now the next method is not a mandatory that will be called or not, but this method will be triggered if you have any checks that got failed inside the check before save method. So if anything you are validating, any validation you have put, or any custom logic which gets failed in the check before save method, at that time your cleanup finalize will be triggered. This method will not be triggered every time if the case is successful. It will only get triggered to clean up the data or the transactional buffer data which are failed in the check before save method. Now the next thing and very important thing is derived types. Basically these are all the derived types, and these are predefined types which gets the value at runtime. We will be seeing what are all these actual use case scenarios where these can be used and how these can be used. It's a best practice to always use these derived types, derived data types, or we can say component of the derived types. For example, like CID, this stands for content ID. When you create a record and it has a primary key, until and unless the record gets created or it is saved into the persistent state, it goes into the persistent state, you do not have a primary key assigned to that record, right? So in that case, this is the type which we used to get the temporary primary key for that record, right? Similarly, %tky is used to identify the primary key for the record. Like for example, ID is a field which has the key value, or it's the key field for any table. You do not need to remember the field name, you just need to write the %tky and it will automatically map to that primary key field, and you can put the condition there. This will provide you if the draft is enabled, then parameter is there, message is there if there is any failed condition. Then if you want to work on the control, for example insert, delete, update buttons, you want to make them visible, you want to hide them, so all of those kind of things you can use %control there. So these were all the high level information on the unmanaged scenario, and in the upcoming video we will be seeing some technical things. We will be seeing how exactly we work in unmanaged scenario, and we will be creating a full application. Most probably it will be similar to the one we created in our managed scenario, but at that time everything was generated by the framework. This time we will be writing everything. So that's all for now in this video, and if you like the content, please consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you.